All right, so chapter 12, part 2, starting with the Inca Empire. As you can see here, here's your terrace farming or your step farming. The only way you could farm in the areas that the Incas actually farm, which is going to be in the Andes Mountains. So the Inca, thousands of miles south of Mexico, advanced cultures developed along the Pacific coast and in the Andes Mountains of South America. People in the Andes terrace mountains, okay, and grew potatoes and other root crops that would not freeze at night. So a lot of that stuff is grown under the ground. So they kept llamas, alpacas for their meat, for their wool, and for carrying goods. Around the 1400s, the Incas began expanding their rule across the Andes. Eventually, the Inca ruled an empire covering much of present-day Peru, Ecuador, Bolivia, and Chile. The Inca built stone roads stretching over 10,000 miles to unite the distant should be corners of their empire. Food was preserved and kept in storehouses along the road. The Inca never developed carts with wheels, probably because the vehicles were not suited for the rugged terrain of the Andes Mountains. So the Incas never developed a form of writing. Instead, what they used was the quipu, which is bundles of knotted and colored ropes to count that would keep records and send messages. So that's what you see here. So each one of these strands would be a message. So here's an example of their unbelievable building that they did. There's a person today, of course, with a llama, and then you can see the size of the stones back behind. So their superb engineering skills allowed them to construct vast stone buildings high in the Andes. They had no cement, but they fitted their stones together kind of like a puzzle for the buildings, which fit perfectly together, which you can see here in the background. The ruins of Machu Picchu, which is over on the right, an ancient fortress city in the Andes Mountains, provides the best surviving example of Inca building skills. Many of the building blocks weighed 50 tons but are so precisely fitted together that their joints do not permit a thin knife blade to be inserted. So pre-Columbian art, okay, was highly developed. Maya, Aztec, and Incas all made stone sculptures to decorate the sides of their temples and palaces. Ceramic bowls carved with human and animal forms across the front for religious ceremonies. Often these were used to ward off demonic spirits believed to be lurking in the afterlife. So gender roles for Mesoamerica. Gender roles are going to be established at birth. Boys were given a machete, which of course is a type of knife with a wide blade, by their fathers to establish their masculine role. Girls received a stone instrument from their mothers used to grind maize, which is going to be corn. So boys were taught crafts, girls were taught to cook and other necessities. Women held various roles in the family, from harvesting grains and preparing food to caring for animals. Aside from childbearing and raising children, one of the women's major job was making maize into flour. So after being boiled, the corn kernels were then ground into stone and then ground by the stone into dough. Women could hold jobs outside their home. Some sold goods in the market. Some were skilled artisans. Others were priestesses who worked in the temples. Drawing of the time of your Incas, probably Aztecs, Mayan also be very similar. If you see the tortillas in the background. So the Columbian Exchange, the writings of Marco Polo had increased European interest in trade in Asia. So his stories had gotten back to Europe. Okay, goods, especially silks, spices, were carried overland from Constantinople and then shipped across the Mediterranean by the Italian city-states. The conquest of the Byzantine Empire, okay, which is going to happen in this area and here, okay, and by the Ottoman Turks in 1453, cut off the trade between Asia and Europe. As a result, incentives were created to find a new route to the east, especially by an all-water passage. So the Europeans are going to need to try and find a way around Africa, or what some of them thought is sail the Atlantic and end up over in Asia. So at the same time, the spirit of inquiry of the Renaissance was leading Europeans to explore the oceans. So Europeans adapted technological innovations from other cultures, which you had the compass from China, you had the sails that came from Arab ships. So all this kind of came together and allowed this new era of exploration. So age of discovery, Spain and Portugal, of course, are going to lead the way just because their position, where they're at, right off the coast of the Atlantic. Spain and Portugal located on the western end of Europe. Spain has coast on the Mediterranean Sea and on the Atlantic Sea. Both countries were determined to gain a share of the trade with Asia and had the resources and need to finance the costly overseas exploration. So Prince Henry of Portugal developed a new lighter sailing ship, sponsored expeditions along the coast of Africa. So they're exploring the coast of Africa, trying to find a way to get into India and Asia. Then the Age of Discovery, what you had in Spain is Ferdinand and Isabella had just completed the reconquest of what used to be Muslim Spain, so forcing the Muslims out of Spain, and they reunited the country under Christian rule in 1492, same time as Columbus. So in the same year, they expelled the Spanish Jewish community. Spain's rulers hoped to further spread Christian faith and to glorify their country through overseas exploration. So this is just kind of the what you see is the green areas were ruled by Muslims at the time, and eventually Spain's going to force the Muslims out of Spain. What you have here is Isabella and Ferdinand, and of course these are some of your Jewish scholars that are getting ready to be kicked out of the country. So Christopher Columbus, he is from Genoa, Italy, was convinced that he could reach Asia by sailing westward. After years of seeking support, he finally persuaded the rulers of Spain to provide him with 3 ships in 1492. Columbus actually thought the world was smaller than what it is today. After 2 months at sea, his men almost mutinied. Then they accidentally landed in the Americas. Instead of reaching the East Indies, they thought they were going to land in India. His discovery of the Americas provided new sources of wealth and raw materials that would forever alter the economy of Europe. So here's his ships. Here's the four voyages, and you can see he lands in the Caribbean. He does get the Central America once. So Columbus' encounter with the peoples of the Americas quickly led to the important exchange of products and ideas known as the Columbian Exchange. The European diet was greatly improved by the introduction of new American foods such as tomatoes, corn, potatoes, peppers, squash, pineapples, and chocolate. Also such animals as the turkey provided new food sources for Europeans. Tobacco was also brought to Europe. At the same time, wheat, sugar, cattle, horses, pigs, sheep, chickens, grains such as wheat were introduced from Europe into the Americas. So you can see the different things that were brought from Europe and then the things that were exchanged from North America at that time. So after Columbus' great success, we had later explorers. Europeans competed with one another in sending out explorers to find new trade routes and to seek new lands. Portuguese explorer da Gama discovered an all-water route from Europe to India by sailing around the tip of Africa in 1497. His discovery made it possible for Europeans to now obtain Asian goods without having to go on the overland routes. In 1519, Magellan, another Portuguese explorer, led the first expeditions of ships to circumnavigate or circle the world. Sailing around South America across the Pacific, Magellan proved conclusively that the world was round. Magellan himself died on the voyage. So England, France, and Holland each sent their own explorers to find all water routes to Asia and to claim new lands. So Cabot, an Englishman, claimed territories in North America. France sent Cartier, Champlain, and Robert de La Salle to explore the St. Lawrence River, which is right in here, the Great Lakes, and then the Mississippi River. The Dutch sent Henry Hudson, on a quest to find a shortcut. What they're still looking for is a route into Asia. To find a shortcut from Europe into the Far East, Hudson explored the Hudson Bay in Canada and the Hudson River in America in hopes of finding a northwest passage, trying to get all the way across into Asia.